Alchemists, and welcome to Alchemist Theater Presents The Wounded Healer. Ooh. Throughout this digital performance, you are going to hear three completely different, seemingly opposite perspectives on how we feel about the phrase and the idea of the wounded healer, which is why I love Alchemist Theater so much, because there's no dogma. We are just giving you and bringing to you our truths as they are resonating within us as individuals right now, and then you get to decide what resonates with you, and you'll know a truth because you'll feel it. So I'm really looking forward to hearing back from you guys about what stuck with you and what didn't. So for my part, I actually love the concept of the archetype of the wounded healer for three reasons. One, I think the concept of a wounded healer keeps the individual healers themselves in a humble place. Because being a healer can be a dangerous path to walk, because sometimes you can forget to have humility. You can forget that you're human, and you can put yourself on a pedestal. So I think remembering that you are wounded, that you are human, that you are imperfect helps you to remember that there is no hierarchy between you and the clients that you're working with. The second reason that I like the concept and archetype of a wounded healer is because it also helps remind our clients that we are human and we are imperfect so often. And I know that I have done this when I work with a profound and prophetic and powerful, talented healer. I tend to put them on a pedestal. Not only does that create some golden shadow issues where I credit them with having powers that I do not have for myself, and I also give them the responsibility of the healing that took place, when really it was me who needs to hold on to and remember that I walked through that healing and that I allowed it into my space. They just opened the door. But a lot of times when we do put those healers on a pedestal, it doesn't produce just metaphysical problems with the concept of healing and our ability to receive that healing, but it also can create conflict later. And so when we're super in love with a healing practitioner that we really like, that has helped us work a lot of miracles, and then they make a mistake, they don't get back to you in time, they forget to text you back, they don't call you back when you really needed them, or they have drama in their life, or they get hurt, or they get into an accident, or they have a tragedy or a drama happen to them, it shocked us because we had created this hero in our mind, and that hero we thought couldn't be imperfect. And so when they do something imperfect, when they curse, or when they get sassy, or when they have an attitude, or they gossip, or they let us down because of our own flawed expectations, it's because we forget that they are wounded too, and that they have triggers, and that they have wounds that sometimes get lit up. And when wounds get lit up and triggers get triggered, you know what? People become imperfect. So when we forget that the healer that we're working with is wounded, then we run the risk of creating an expectation that they cannot live up to, and then they fail us, right? Thus affecting our ability to receive healing from them anymore, or to be in a healing space with them. So I think it's really important for us to remember that every healer that we're working with is a wounded healer. And if they tell you otherwise, then get the hell out of there. Because I want to tell my clients all the time, like, I'm a wounded healer. I am imperfect. I go through the same shit that you go through. The only thing that is different from me is that I'm a healer. Everyone is wounded, but not everyone is a healer, right? So you might be a wounded engineer, or a wounded artist, or a wounded doctor. Well, I'm a wounded healer, and what makes me a wounded healer is that I have wounds, and then my job just happens to be leading other people through theirs. Which leads me to the third reason that I love the concept, the idea of the archetype of a wounded healer. Last year, I stumbled into this new church in Sparks called New Seasons, and I really love it. Highly recommend it. Evangelical, they've got a Hispanic service. Love these people. Their worship band, top notch. And the pastor that day was talking about that God molds your valleys to fit your purpose. Love that. Oh my gosh, one of my favorite sermons I've ever heard. And what he meant by that, if you're a prophet, the valleys that you walk through are going to be different from someone who is a warrior. So God has a specific use for you in his kingdom, or her kingdom, however you want to think of it. And so your trials, your tribulations, your valleys, your wounds are going to be molded to fit your specific purpose. So the reason that I really love this idea of a wounded healer is because you can use your wounds as a compass to discover where your purpose is. For me, as a wounded healer, I am going to be really good at helping shepherd people through their wounds of not being chosen, not being important. The reason that I am going to be so good at helping people move through that wounding is because those are the wounds that I have moved through. So by looking at the valleys, the trials, tribulations, and the wounds that we have as individuals, it can literally help point us to the direction that we're supposed to be moving in life. And if you're a wounded healer, which is very meta because you are healing people who also have wounds, it's going to help show you the specific population and the people that you are meant to be working with. So my question that I leave you with: what are your wounds? And how do you think that those wounds were specifically molded for you by your higher power, and that your higher self came into agreement with in this lifetime to have these wounds so that you could be helping a specific population? What are those wounds? What population are you supposed to be helping? And how can you use your wounds to help shepherd others through theirs?
Hey everyone, Reverend Divine here. I'm so excited to be speaking to you today about a conversation that I have quite a few feelings about, and that is the theme of the wounded healer. And here's feeling the first. I do not like the phrase wounded healer. I find it quite aggravating and frustrating, mainly because it's thrown around so arbitrarily these days. It has the same feeling of #woke to it, because everyone is a wounded healer, and we wear it as this red badge of courage. I'm a wounded healer. And then at the same time, we talk about how we don't like the words wounded or healer. And that they're really problematic and limiting. We say we don't like the word wounded because then it puts people in this box of being broken, that they need to be fixed, and that there's something inherently wrong with them, and that we're supposed to see people in their totality, in their wholeness, and that there is nothing wrong with them. So we put this label that they're wounded as part of their inherent identity, which they aren't. They're not inherently wounded. They may have wounds, and those wounds may open from time to time, and any number of things can occur because of that, but they are not themselves wounded. And then I also hear that we don't like the word healer. It's not really what I do. I don't heal people. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a healer. That just doesn't really resonate with me. But then we say wounded healer, and we don't like healer because that makes us personally responsible for somebody's journey. And who are we? Who are we to take personal responsibility for someone's healing path? That assumes that we know better than the divine design of what's in store for that person. So we may assume, based upon our ownness, that somebody's healing looks like this. And so we try to direct them and control and guide them to move down a certain path, only to come to understand that that wasn't meant for them, and that it's not actually in their highest good. And so when we say healer, we assume that the end of the journey is always going to come with the removal of the wound. Like, that's what healing looks like. That's the healing journey, is that the wound will be removed. Maybe the wound is there because it has information for us. Maybe the wound is there because it serves us. Maybe the wound just becomes less and less, and then eventually it closes. I don't really know. But we then put the two of those things together, and we're like, wounded healer, yes, yes, I love it, wounded healer. And I think the archetype of a wounded healer has a lot of utility to it, understanding our own shadow, understanding our own trauma, and especially if you're a practitioner working with patients, how that could interfere and influence those sessions, and how you might consciously or unconsciously project something onto your client based upon your own background. And I think that's very worthwhile, and we should all understand our wounds, our trauma, our past, and our shadows. So these are sort of the questions and things that I want to know for our salon on Saturday. One, if you have a better term phraseology than wounded healer, I'm all for it. I think words have power. I think how we use words have power. So if you have a better term than wounded healer, I would love to hear it. Secondly, wounded healer is an archetype. And ideally speaking, archetypes are not places that we set up permanent residency in. Archetypes are things that we move through. Certain events, situations on our hero's journey will evoke times when we live in certain archetypes. We might be the warrior one day, and then the priestess the next, and then the hierophant, and then so on and so forth. But the wounded healer seems like an archetype that we permanently live in. Once you identify as a wounded healer, you never really move out of that space. So my question is, A, do you ever leave the archetype of the wounded healer? And what are the circumstances around that? And what does that look like? And what is the harm of staying permanently in that wounded healer archetype? How is that actually limiting and holding you back and placing restrictions upon you fulfilling your highest good and highest purpose as a practitioner of the light? So those are my questions for you. I can't wait to hear your thoughtful, engaging responses this Saturday, 10 a.m., Walden's on Arlington. We will be there. I will have a breakfast burrito and a huge thing of coffee, and I look forward to sharing space with all of you. Have a good night. Mwah!
Hello, everyone. So, the wounded healer, huh? Some of us like the concept, some of us have some resistance toward the concept. I am indifferent to the concept, and I really mean that in a neutral way. I see the wounded healer as more of a channel that we click on and off from throughout our day. So I don't look at it as an identity thing that we embody constantly, but rather a channel that sometimes we click onto it, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. Other times, we're just talking about the weather or sports or the news and kind of these surface level issues. And I think it's that wounded healer channel that actually allows us to connect with others on a more deeper level. So you could be in line at the grocery store and all of a sudden the person behind you strikes up a conversation, and maybe the initial thing is something very surface level, maybe about an item in your cart or something that's going on in the store. But then out of nowhere, it might click onto that wounded healer channel. They might be talking about a memorial service that they just came from out of nowhere, and something about your energy made them feel comfortable enough to share something so personal. And of course, we have, as many of us are empaths, different reactions to when strangers or even people we know kind of get into their stuff. But oftentimes, it's that wounded healer channel that allows us to see each other for who we really are. People that struggle, who have successes, but also massive failures, who have enormous triumphs and things to celebrate in our lives, but also these core wounds that just keep coming up again and again and again and again. And so when we're really vibrating with another person, I think a lot of the time it has to do with when we share our successes and we share our setbacks, and we're able to do so from an honest and more truthful standpoint. And so it's that wound, it's the healing energy and the combination of the two that brings us together and allows us to grow deeper relationships, because on that channel we're all the same, and we can't convince ourselves that we're different when we're vibrating with another person on that channel. I was reminded of this concept that we're kind of mirrors for each other in that aspect when we were listening to a podcast the other night, which was a recording from some kind of performance or talk that Ram Dass had given, and the title just made me laugh to death. We're all just saving each other's asses. And I think what that means is that mirror concept, that we all have these struggles and we're here to shepherd each other through our valleys, as Reverend Levity pointed out. And so where can you be that kind of shepherd? I think in order to throw a different question out there, I would ask, where can we have more awareness in our own lives when we click onto that wounded healer channel? And when could we click off of it to kind of keep it a little more real, a little more simple? How can we have more awareness around consciously choosing to click onto that channel in order to connect more deeply with another person? When can we have more awareness to kind of dial it back and just take an easier approach?